Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Maloney, and welcome to Field Hockey Talk. Today, we're doing an Umpiring the Game episode, and I'm joined by Ginette Tessier. She's the lead developer for South Central Officiating in England. Good morning, Ginette.
Good morning to you. Well, good afternoon for me, but good morning to you.
Yes. I work for a global company, and a lot of times we have to start meetings by saying good morning, good afternoon, good evening, sort of like the beginning of oh my goodness, I can't remember the show that movie. Anyway,
Truman Show.
Oh yes, exactly. So anyway, thank you again for joining. I've got the intent to find out a little bit about how umpiring is organized in England, largely in comparison with how things are done in the USA, because that's where I grew up and started umpiring. So I wonder, though, before we start talking about field hockey, we could learn a little bit about yourself outside of the field hockey realm.
Sure, yeah. So I run my own business, hence the reason that I'm at home in the middle of the day. And I help small business owners to create online business assets. So things like online courses, websites, videos, and a little bit of extra stuff, help them with marketing, that kind of thing. And I set that up 10 years ago. After 22 plus years as a corporate slave. And now I commonly say that I've gone feral, so I'm completely unemployable. So I need to make the business work.
Yeah, very good. Very good. So do you script training programs or help produce them?
Yeah, all of the above. So I run my own training programs. In the early days, I used to go into corporate organizations and run training programs for them. But now I help other people understand how to put together particularly online training programs, but also I do occasionally go out and run a few myself. I also have several online courses myself. I've written a book about creating online courses, and I have several lovely clients who rely on me to help them mainly get through the tech troubles that they might have from time to time with what they're doing. So it's all about helping business owners to create assets that can leverage their credibility and authority and bring them additional income.
Okay, great. And after our conversation, let's get the title of your book. I assume it's available on Amazon?
It is. It's called Get That Course Online, and you can just about see a copy in the background on my bookshelf. And it's a step-by-step guide for experts who want to increase their impact and income. And it takes you through right from idea generation all the way through to creating the course, designing the course, filming it, all the tech stuff, where you're going to host it, how to launch it, how to write your sales page, pricing strategies. And the final chapter is a chapter on the jargon that surrounds online course creation, because there's a lot of that, as there is in any industry, right, including hockey, right?
Yeah, I joke that sometimes that the company that I work for, the global company, it's a company of acronyms.
Oh, yeah.
My favorite acronym was PCM CIA cards. I don't know if you remember them. They were way big. And people joke that was called People Can't Memorize Computer Industry Acronyms, PC, ACI. Okay. Well, I got that. Then I got it wrong. All right. So anyway, that sort of sets up a interesting field hockey world for you, because I know that you are the lead developer for South Central, in terms of the training efforts that you do. Definitely send me the name of the book and I'll include it in the notes below. I've learned to do that, while doing podcasts. So tell me just generally what your role is, how'd you start umpiring, what led you into this role? Just give us a little background.
Sure. So I started umpiring, first of all, when I was at university. So that was in the early 90s, and really only started doing it because the hockey teams at uni needed people to go out and be an umpire on the Wednesday afternoon matches. And then I didn't really touch a whistle until probably towards the end of the 1990s, and the team that I was playing for at the time, we were running in the structure as was a pool system of umpires. So if you were in a particular division of the league, then you had to supply at least one umpire to go out and umpire another team in that league. So that's how I got back into umpiring. And then a couple of seasons later, somebody said to me, "Oh, you should think about taking neutral appointments," at which point I was, what's that all about then? I had no idea there was this whole huge system in England for umpires. And yeah, so I started taking neutral appointments, worked my way through the system as it was, and eventually ending up as a National League umpire, which I did for 4 or 5 seasons, something like that, and then became injured in the run-up to the fitness test, which we have to do to umpire at that level, and got a phone call from somebody that I know within the system who suggested that I might want to, if I was capable of standing by the side of a pitch, even if I couldn't run, then I could absolutely help out assessing and coaching other umpires. And that's really where it began from there. So I had a succession of roles with the local, as was, county association, umpiring association. And then when England hockey restructured, hockey in England and the regions and how it was all set up and how everything works, which was, I think, 2021, certainly post-pandemic, but only just, then the incoming chairman of the Area Officiating Committee, as it's now called, can't call it something as simple as umpiring, has to be the Area Officiating Committee, phoned me up and said that I'd been recommended by a few people to take on the volunteer role of lead developer, which is essentially looking after the development of umpires who take neutral appointments within South Central. And we have another person, a lady called Rowena Shepherd, who is in charge of helping clubs to develop their club umpires with a view to hopefully some of them wanting to also take up neutral appointments. So we work very closely together in trying to create that sort of seamless run through from somebody first picking up a whistle to becoming newly qualified, to getting experience on games, to taking neutral appointments, and then working through the neutral appointment system. So within South Central, within the 8 areas, as there are within England hockey now, we take umpires up to the end of what's currently level 2. And if we have umpires that can go beyond that, then we will nominate them to NPUA, which governs all the elite hockey in England, and put them forward for assessment. So our job really is for those umpires that have the talent and have the ambition to go further, is to help them develop, but also helping umpires who perhaps have come down from a higher level, or who are quite happy at the level that they're umpiring at, helping them to just improve as the game changes and evolves, and also helping them to get as much fun and enjoyment out of the game as they possibly can, all the while they can carry on running around a pitch and holding a whistle.
There you go. So there are a couple things I want to take out of that for shorter answers. So the leagues are filled by clubs, and then those clubs have to, in order to participate in the league, have to provide at least one umpire. Did I get that correctly?
It used to be the case. It is no longer the case at the moment, although there are conversations happening about whether or not bringing back that type of system would be helpful. We do tend to go out to clubs relatively regularly and help them with their umpire development, and we rely on the clubs to ask us for that sort of assistance. We have some, as I'm sure you do in the States, we have some very big clubs with sort of 6 or 7 teams on both the men's and the ladies, and mixed and juniors and that kind of thing. And then we have some very tiny clubs with possibly even just 1 team. So our job really is to help them to develop umpires, usually from within their ranks. We tend to find most umpires will come from the playing pool. Some are players that have stopped playing because their knees don't work anymore, and some are still wanting to play. And then there are others who we work with a lot who still want to play every now and again, but are happy to prioritize their umpiring.
I see. Yeah. So a couple of things. First of all, if you use the word men, and in the U.S., there are basically no male field hockey players. So there are clubs The organization of a club, though, in the U.S. is primarily for developing young female players who are seeking to play in college or the university level, the NCAA. There are, well, you know, if you pick a club in the United States, first of all, they might have hundreds of players and one male who can participate in national tournaments and whatnot with a team if they're, I believe, under 12. Maybe there's some mixed under 14s, but there's like one guy on that club. When I started playing, there was kind of like one guy in New Jersey who played. I'm exaggerating a bit, but at least in southern New Jersey, where I am, I was the only guy that played. So very few males play here. Anyway, so now, but so you have the club umpire, which sounds almost like a rating, although not exactly. I understand that. And then you have the neutral umpires, meaning a club umpire is going to umpire games with other clubs and their own club, I guess.
Yeah, mainly their own.
Right. In that case, they would not be neutral per se. Sure, they would be doing a good job. And then you have the neutral umpire. So at what point does England hockey, if you will, start, and it might be through your organization, start applying a rating? And do you start with a level 1 or end with a level 1? And how many ratings are there? 3 probably, right?
Yeah, sort of. So what tends to happen is that England hockey will leave it to the areas to take umpires through level 1, level 2, and then MPUA, which is the National Program Umpiring Association. They will take umpires into level 3 and beyond. Within each of the levels, there are several different panels. At the moment, there's a little bit of inconsistency between the areas as to how many panels there are. Some of that is a function of the types of hockey that is available. If there aren't the teams to play at a certain level, then they won't need to provide umpires at that level. If there are, then obviously they do. England hockey do provide some criteria and an online program, some tutoring for people who want to get into umpiring and start at a club umpire level. But within the different leagues and the different divisions within those leagues that we have, at the lower end, for example, you don't have to be qualified as an umpire in order to umpire a match. And then at a certain level, you do have to be a minimum of what's called level 1 unassessed, which means you have to have done the online rules test, you have to have taken a course, but you haven't actually been assessed umpiring on a pitch. We help the clubs to get their umpires assessed to level 1 assessed standard. They don't have to go through us, but if they do, then we have much more resource to help them with that. We also have a team of level 1 assessors who will go out and are trained in how to assess an umpire at that level, to either pass them or advise them that perhaps they need a little bit more experience blowing the whistle before they get their level 1 assessed qualification. So level 1 assessed is the minimum qualification to take neutral appointments within England. And generally speaking, a level 1 assessed umpire can expect to umpire what we call divisional games. And these are for teams who play at the divisional level. It's loosely based around the old county structure that we moved away from. So obviously you have states over in America. We have our equivalent is a county. So we have different counties used to be responsible for umpiring. It's now all merged into the areas. But as a general rule, the divisions tend to go more or less around the county lines. There's a little bit of blurring here and there depending on where a team is based, and they're not nice boxes. So, you know, you could imagine that the geography tends to dictate where the various teams, the various clubs actually end up playing. So once an umpire is level 1 assessed and they start taking neutral appointments, if they reach the top of the panel within neutral appointments with us in South Central, then we will look at promoting them and assessing, coaching them, assessing them, and then promoting them to what's called level 2, which in, as we would say in old money, essentially means they are umpiring a wider range of clubs over a greater geographical distance. And within South Central, we have got 4 main counties, kind of 5. I'm sorry to anybody on the Isle of Wight, doing them a bit of a disservice, but it's an island off the south coast, with a couple of teams. And then we also have some clubs who are bordering the counties that we cover, but geographically and logistically, it's easier for them transport-wise to play within South Central. So we take a few clubs from the bordering counties as well into South Central. And at level 2, an umpire could expect to go from the very north of the region to the very south of the region, east and west, in order to fulfill appointments. That said, we do try not to make umpires travel too far, but if they get up to National League level, then there can be quite a significant amount of travel involved. So the highest level is level 3 within MPUA, but that can go all the way up to Premier, and then FIH level, and so on.
So a couple things. MPUA, National Premier Umpires
National Program Umpiring Association.
Program, okay. And let's talk about the structure just to go over for me and for our listeners. So you have club umpires, neutral umpires. You have a level 1 unassessed, which means they've done the academic work.
Yep.
I guess they get a certificate, they have completed that or something along those lines. So you know who's who. And then you start with an assessment at some point. A person, okay, I want to be seen on the field. You have people who are trained assessors. I do want to learn a little bit about the training that goes into someone who can show up and say, hey, I'm a trained assessor, as it were. And now I'm a level 1, I'm assessed, and I can start doing, lower level games, but I can start doing neutral games, right? That's a level 1 assessed starts doing that. And then within level 1, before I get to level 2, there are panels.
Yes.
And so to me, a panel is, like a room that has a table in the front and there's people sitting on the panel. So this is a band. How many bands, how many panels inside a level 1 are there?
So within South Central, we are very fortunate in that we have quite a wide range of standards of hockey within the area, which means that we probably have more panels, or we're certainly at the top end of the number of panels that are within each of the levels. Call it grades if it makes it easier for you. But we start with somebody who is a candidate. So this is an umpire who is level 1 assessed and has put their name forward and said, I would like to try neutral appointments. Everybody who is new to umpiring or new to being level 1 assessed will start as a candidate. We'll send somebody out to assess them. And then more often than not, we will place them on the C panel, which is the lowest level of level 1 that we will take for umpiring neutral appointments. If they successfully pass through C, then they will become B2. If they successfully go through B2, they become B1. And then for those who are on the right track to get promotion to level 2, we put them in a special panel called B star, which essentially...
Wait, sorry. Well, let's go back to 2 things. If there is a C, why is there a 3? Are they not the same thing?
No.
C3, B2, A1?
No. So
okay, don't explain yet. And then the next thing is and then they want to, I think you said now they want to go to level 2, and they get put on to what?
A2 if they are successful at passing their assessment. So if they are in the running to be assessed for level 2, then they're B star.
Star, S-T-A-R?
Like an asterisk.
Oh, asterisk. Okay. So, okay. What is that again? What is it asterisking?
It just means that they are in line for promotion. So
no. I mean, so you are an A asterisk, A1 asterisk?
No, you would, if you are B star or A star, then you are
Okay.
the top of that particular level.
That
So
panel, right?
yeah,
That
so
panel. Okay.
a B star would be at the top of the ability and experience as a level 1 umpire. You would expect a B star to then get promoted into level 2, where they start at A2, and then they can get promoted to A1, and then they can get promoted to A star. If they're an A star, that means they're in the running to get nominated to level 3 and assessment by MPUA.
All right. So if I have this right, and I'm sorry, but this is very interesting to me because
No problem.
the way it's organized. So in any one of the groups, there's always an A, B, and C.
No, A is only at level 2.
Okay.
Okay, and B and C is only at level 1.
Okay.
The reason that we've done this
Yep.
is because level 1, level 2, level 3 is relatively well established as an umpiring structure within England. But because of the wide range of hockey that is played at level 1, level 2, level 3, there have to be panels within that, or grades within that, so that the appointers who don't necessarily know the umpires have a better understanding of putting umpires on the right match for their ability. What we don't want is for somebody to be newly level 1 assessed, start taking neutral appointments, and then all of a sudden be put on the top of the divisional game that's on that weekend, when their experience would just overwhelm them because they wouldn't be ready for that level of game. So
Right.
you can imagine that between the various divisions that we have within South Central, the teams at the very top are way, way better than the teams at the very bottom. And it's the same for umpires. The umpires operating at the very top are way, way better than the umpires operating at the very bottom. This doesn't mean to say that they're not very good umpires. It just means that they are good for the level they're at. And in the development team, what we try and do is help them to get better. For some, this will mean that they get promoted. For others, it will mean they stay at that level, but they are able to better enjoy the game.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's fantastic, and you're blessed by having, a diverse level standards, right? In the U.S., we just don't really have that. We have young children who are playing, who you could argue are, at a low level, because they're just beginners. And then we have at the high school level, so typically women who are up to 18 years of age. And inside that group, starting from 14 to 18, roughly, you have what we call the varsity team, which is the best. And we have the sub-varsity team, or junior varsity, and their standard is typically far off from the varsity level. There's a big gap there. And then you go to college, and we go from 70,000 young women playing field hockey in that high school realm, 14 to 18 years of age, to about 5,000 playing at the university level. And inside the university level, we have 3 divisions. And inside those divisions, although they're not named in any way, there are really good teams and teams that you're surprised are in that division, because there's an unnamed level differentiator within those groups. You have it identified, I think, because the league structure is such that, I don't know, maybe there's 12 teams in a league and you're competing to get into the next level.
Correct.
So the top team moves up and the worst team moves down, and that helps identify these levels, which helps you identify essentially what umpires are going to be in which levels. And by essentially, I mean it gives you the structure where you can do that, which of course is very helpful for umpires in 2 ways. One, you don't, as you mentioned, you don't want to put an umpire in over their head. On the other hand, especially with weaker knees or slower sprinting ability, meaning age, you might be quite happy at whatever that level is and not really interested in trying to achieve more. You're comfortable. Talk a little bit about the assessors, because you mentioned that they go through an assessing training.
Mhm.
So tell me about that. How do you assess your assessors? How do you train up assessors?
So there are a couple of routes to becoming a level 1 assessor, to take an umpire from level 1 unassessed to level 1 assessed. We have a few people who are also official England hockey tutors, who are the people who are trusted to go out and run the programs for people on the pitch. Sometimes a club, if they're large enough, they've got large enough interest in people becoming umpires, then that's what will happen. In England, you either have to be approved by your area officiating, your officiating area. You have to be approved by your officiating area to be listed on the computer system called GMS as a level 1 umpire assessor. Or if you are level 2 and above and connected to a club, you are technically allowed to carry out level 1 assessments. In reality, we tend to not discourage this, but we don't tend to publicize that incredibly widely because it can lend itself to a little bit of abuse there, from the point of view, although I'm sure nobody would ever think of doing this, the point of view of somebody who is a level 2 umpire within their club, but they're only associated with the club by name, and they sort of rock up and watch an umpire for 5 minutes and go, yeah, they'll do. The problem with that is that they're not necessarily completing the criteria properly. So
Right,
we
right.
have
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering, the criteria of evaluating, but also that's part of the assessing training, is to know what the criteria is, how to judge it.
Yeah, absolutely right. So we also have a level 1 assessment manager who called Hattie Wood, who Rowena, the club liaison person, and myself as lead developer work very closely with, just to make sure that we're supporting clubs and also able to get level 1 assessors that we have trained or we trust to go out and complete the job properly. And part of the reason that we want to do this is because the number one thing that an umpire is there for is the safety of the players. And we need to make sure that an umpire, if they're going to be passed as level 1 assessed, which does affect where they can umpire on a Saturday and the standard of game that they can umpire, what we need to make sure is that they have the very basic foundational skills required to go and safely umpire and look after the teams that are on the pitch with them.
So the assessors, are they completing a form?
Yes.
And so would you be able to share that form with me?
I don't know that I've got the latest copy, to be perfectly honest, because it's not.
Yeah, it's not a rush. I would just love to see that in comparison to, I mean, in the United States, just to give you a little bit of information about how the umpiring is typically organized. Many umpires, there's 2 routes, if you will, to, let's pretend, umpiring at the Olympics, right? Like let's say that's the ultimate pathway, or the destination, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of umpires start in the schoolgirl world, where they're doing youth games that are held by schools. And by youth, I mean what we call middle school. So those are maybe 11, 12, 13-year-olds, maybe some 14-year-olds. Those competitions happen between schools, not between clubs. And then those kids move up to high school, and those that are still interested, or a lot of times in the US, kids are just starting in high school. They're picking up a stick for the first time when they're 14 years of age. And then they're in high school. So those schools all compete. They tend to compete within a small geographic area. Typically, governmental borders are what identifies that, and we call them counties. So you have a state like New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and inside those states, there are organizing bodies that are affiliated with a national association, not USA Field Hockey, our national governing body, but with the National High School Athletic Association or something along those lines, abbreviated NFHS.
Mm-hmm.
And then the states follow the NFHS rules, which I'm looking for a book I could pull it out and show it to you, which is different, but very much like the FIH rules. But there are some significant differences. that are problematic for umpires. They typically, the organization kind of lags behind what the FIH rules are. So for example, there was a year where in the FIH world, you could stop a ball above your shoulders with a stick for the first time. But in what our national federation rules, you couldn't do that. So an umpire might go to do a high school game, and when a kid does that, it was a yellow card. And then that evening, the same umpire goes and does a college game, which does the FIH rules with some modifications, really regulation differences. And they're allowed to use their stick to stop a ball above the shoulder. And the umpire blows the whistle and is ready to, give a yellow card, and is like, oh no, wait a minute, that was the high school rules. Anyway, inside each state, then there are these governmental borders, counties, and there is probably an umpire association inside each one of those counties. Now, I say probably only because those county lines are kind of soft, because it depends on where the schools are, just like what you said in terms of what your region is, but then you have teams just outside it near the border. So those organizations, then they're their own little fiefdoms of umpires. They're not really connected to the state in any particular way. They follow the state association rules, but they're independent organizations. They can basically do what they want while maintaining an affiliate relationship with the state, who has an affiliate relationship with that national federation. And you can grow up in umpiring and never know about the FIH or the international game and stay within that world. And then maybe some people will want to go into the college realm. Anyway, inside that world, in terms of assessors, it's just typically the older umpires. Mm-hmm. There is no training for, or no published certification standards for becoming an assessor or an evaluator in that area. Meaning in that pathway, that school pathway. Now, USA field hockey, a little different, but I would say there are trusted evaluators as opposed to certified evaluators. But you are assessed, and we go level 3 to 1, and frankly, that was my fault. But we finally established those levels. And then inside those levels, there's no panels, there's no differentiation. You just officiate inside that level, and you are trying to get a score in terms of being evaluated that gets you to a point where your score is high enough that you can move up a level. And that basically is a test. I'm sorry if this is going on and on, but so let's say I'm a level 1 umpire. I'm sorry, a level 3 umpire here, you're level 1. I'm only doing games that involve probably kids that are under 15, maybe under 16 years of age. And now I want to become a level 2 umpire. I want to move up a grade. Well, so they'll give me, I'm going to have to reach a score that gets me up to the top, that shows everyone that, like I can do this level and still get a high score. Then I move into the next level, I get harder games, and now my score, which I'm making this up, was a 7.3, drops to a 2.1 because I'm not doing so well at that higher level. If I were to go down a level, great. I'm back up in the, I have a high rating again. But up here, then I have to work and work and work to get a better and better score. And then you mentioned who's doing the appointing to the neutral games. Here, we call those people assigners as opposed to like an appointment secretary or something. And the assigner says they might look at those ratings that USA Field Hockey has given me, or the umpires rather, or the evaluations that were done inside the school area. But really, the assigners decide who they want on what games. There's no ramifications other than if an umpire gets put in over their head, they might find out in a bad way that they put the wrong umpire on that game. But there's no qualifications to be an assigner, and you're not necessarily following a standard in terms of deciding who goes on what games. Mm-hmm. It sounds like in your area that is much more controlled. You can't just kind of end up
Yeah.
on an appointment secretary's list of umpires if you don't have these qualifications? Or should I ask, is that possible? Can I come to England, not be known, but looks like I can blow a whistle, and all of a sudden I'm on a game I shouldn't be because
No.
the assigner knows me or something?
No, what we would do for anybody transferring in either from out of the area or out of the country, we would ask them about their experience and what sort of standard they are used to umpiring. We'll also ask them if they usually umpire men's or ladies, although obviously coming from the States, it would be, I guess, mainly ladies. And so what we would do then is we would try to appoint them to a match depending on their experience level and what we know of other levels around the world or in different areas. We would appoint them to a match that either is a, when I say means nothing, obviously it means something to the teams that are playing, but we don't want to give them a promotion or a relegation game as their first game, or something that is what we would call a 6-pointer, which, you know, if they win that game, it's worth more than the nominal 3 points they get for winning.
Okay, so just so for everybody knows, so a relegation game is what I mentioned earlier, where you're or a promotion game. So if I'm in the lower league and I'm in the finals, or just getting a ranking as a team, then I'm in a promotional opportunity. That's a high stakes game.
Absolutely.
And a regular
relegation
game. Yeah, I was thinking anyway, it doesn't matter. Relegation game, also high stakes, because I might be dropped a level. And of course I don't want that. So, you know, here we don't have that, but you know, we might call them a rivalry game. You know, you don't want to, you might be testing an umpire out in, you know, an environment of more and more competitive games, but you probably don't want that same umpire to be tested out when there's a rivalry between two teams that where there might be some heat. Until your point about safety, you know. So anyway, sorry.
Yeah, no apology required. We absolutely have appointers that really do know the teams and the games and the situation within the divisions or the league that teams are playing in. So what we would look to do is to appoint somebody that we don't know. We would look to appoint them to what I would call a beige game. So we're not anticipating that there will be fireworks. We're not anticipating that it certainly wouldn't be a high stakes game. And we're not anticipating that they will have anything other than a run out. We will also try and appoint them with an experienced colleague so that colleague, if necessary, is able to take up a little bit of slack, take a bit of pressure off of them, give them good advice and guidance over the radios. And then we would send an assessor to that game to either say, yep, happy, no problem, this person can umpire at this level, or occasionally to say, yeah, actually, do you know what, they're better than that. We think we can put them on games that will test them a little bit more. And then once we've done that, we put them on a panel, they go on the system, and then the appointers know and we'll hear from the assessor what they achieved and where we think that they would best be placed for the next few games, just to let them get their feet under the table, so to speak. If they have ambitions to go further, then we have a slightly different program for those umpires, which is really where my developer team comes on board, where we have a team of coaches and assessors. Sometimes it's one person can be both, as I am, and you will go out and with an umpire that's ambitious, we will give them some coaching on their games, and then we will put them in for another assessment. And if they score well, but a bit like your system, if they score well, then that will have implications for how quickly or not they might get promoted.
And so I want to go there. I want to go back on so many things because this is really fascinating for me. The appointers work closely with the assessors.
Yes.
Are the appointers certified in any way, or are they just?
They are incredibly experienced individuals who have been doing the appointing, certainly in South Central, who have been doing the appointing for their relevant parts of the leagues for a very long time. So, I mean, we're very fortunate that all 4 appointers that we have within the South Central area. So we have a lead appointer, and then we have 3 other appointment secretaries who take appointments on behalf of specific areas within South Central. They are all very experienced. They were doing it long before the South Central area was formed, before the restructure through England Hockey. So they know the teams very well. They know a lot of the umpires very well, and have a great understanding of what is going to be, like I say, a beige match and what might be quite fiery red.
Yeah. So let me go back. I want to ask you about radios. And talk about that a little bit, but also I'm remembering now that you mentioned that, you know, this club might, excuse me, have a lot of umpires, would-be umpires, for whatever reason. Maybe they're just large enough, or maybe they've really pushed the idea that, hey guys, like, you're looking like you're pretty good players, but let's learn how to umpire. What's that dynamic like? Is it because you could have a small club that every kid wants to be an umpire, you know, that type of thing. Is there any kind of requirement that, like in the Netherlands, if you're 16 years old, you have to get your certification as an umpire, even if you're not planning to, you know, go to the Olympics someday as an umpire?
Yeah, no, there's
what
nothing
drives that. What's like, are you doing recruiting, or the clubs doing recruiting of umpires? Like, who's filling the pipeline?
So that's a very good question, and it's something that not just in the South Central area, but all over England at the moment, we're spending quite a lot of time looking at that. Various people are looking at that because there is no hard and fast rule for how somebody becomes an umpire. We rely on people within clubs to put their hand up and say, yes, I'd like to try it. Most of the time, the club umpires, particularly level 1 unassessed umpires, will probably come off a game playing for the thirds and go and umpire the fours or something like that. You know, they'll still be in their kit. They'll have a whistle. They probably won't have cards, or if they do, they won't tend to use them that often. So we really work with the clubs as far as possible to help them encourage more of their members to become umpires, and then through that, hopefully some of those umpires decide that either they've got the talent or they've got the ambition to umpire at a higher level than they will get just through their club.
And nobody has a heart attack, right? When somebody says, oh, that umpire just played for that team and now they're doing the younger kids, they're going to cheat.
No.
No.
Well,
okay.
quite apart from anything else, if you accuse an umpire of cheating, it's a red card offence. But,
of course.
But
no, I
yeah,
just meant the mentality. So yeah,
well
if I can just
accepted.
do a pitch for a thing I've long tried to have happen in the U.S. So we have a pretty good structure on the school side of things, and there's typically a varsity or better team, and then the junior varsity team. And a lot of times, because of the expenses, when the teams go to play each other, all the kids line up, get on one bus, and get carted to the other team's field, right? So everybody's there, the varsity and JV, and a lot of times they'll play a varsity game, which is exciting. All the fans come, and then they run the JV game. So it's a varsity JV double. And I've often said the captains from the varsity game should umpire the junior varsity game, and do that because that will foster the development of umpires. And I don't know if you hear this or have the same problem in England, but you know, our number of umpires is going way down in the US. It's never been like particularly healthy, but now people are just like, no. So to me, this fosters, you know, the getting people to umpire. And for the athletes who are umpiring, they start to realize, oh, it's not as easy as I was just complaining that it should be, or something like that. So it helps elevate the level of sportsmanship.
Yeah.
So that's very normal. That type of thing is very normal in England. And here it seemed like, well, you can't possibly do that. They need to be 50 years old at least before they can umpire a game with, you know, 12-year-olds in it.
Wow.
You know, I mean, it's that type of thing. Now, you mentioned radios, and you kind of mentioned it the same way I would. It's just kind of in passing, because pretty much everybody's using radios. There was a time here when it was actually outlawed by that national federation that I mentioned. Umpires were not allowed to wear radios. I don't know what they thought was going on with the radios, but It was actually banned for a number of years at a time when, I was advocating for radios, and, around the world, radios were becoming a thing because the technology was such that it was made possible. They're becoming smaller and smaller, and just part of the game. Just, can you talk about how that developed in England and what the current standard is? Is it required? Do the umpires buy them, or does the club does every club have a radio, and they, here, Mr. Umpire, here's your radio, and Miss Umpire, here's your radio.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of both. We've had radios probably, oh goodness me, definitely pre-pandemic. I would say close to 10 years, in and around 10 years, something like that. And I'm sure anybody that knows me watching this will correct me if I've got that wrong, but they've been around for long enough now. In the early days, when it was still the county system, a lot of the counties ended up buying radios through grants received by their hockey associations. Certainly that's how we did it with the county I was with. And all the umpires taking neutral appointments were effectively given a radio and a headset. And each umpire had one radio and one headset, and they went out and paired them up by the side of the pitch, and away they went. Since the restructure, it's not something that umpires get supplied with. So new umpires joining certainly joining the neutral pool now would be expected to buy their own set of radios, and they come in a set of 2, which effectively means that if you rock up to a game and your colleague has a radio that for whatever reason isn't working properly or isn't pairing, there are options for what you can do about that. Within clubs, it varies hugely. Some clubs provide radios for their club umpires, some don't. Some umpires doing the club umpire games prefer to not have a radio, some prefer to have it, and there's no hard and fast rule other than once you start taking neutral appointments, you are required to wear a radio.
I'm not surprised. I was just going to ask if that's the dividing line in terms of having. Now, do you do, and I'll ask the question, but then I'll tell the story. Do you do radio training? Is there even here's a document? Because as radios became popular here, one of the problems was the misuse of radios. I umpired games where the umpire at the other side is humming a tune that they've done for decades. When they've when they've umpired but didn't have a radio, now they're doing it. They got a radio and I'm listening to it the whole game, humming, and you have to say, quiet, please, quiet, please. We have certainly had experience where umpires, like for example, something happens in a game and you're likely to call out, play on, let this happen. There are umpires I've umpired with in the radio, and they're saying play on like the whole time that they're not whistling, play on, play on, play. Yeah, it's like, okay, if you blow the whistle, they'll stop, that type of thing. Not blowing the whistle tells them to play on. But there are sometimes, when it like looks like a foul and you've decided as the umpire that, no, we want to play this out right now. So I wonder if you have standards. One thing that comes up over and over again in conversations in the US anyway, and in this Facebook group that I run has 33,000 members on it, is that the umpire from the other end of the field overrode the goal or the penalty corner or, whatever for the umpire that is actually managing play in that circle. And, now the radios are very helpful, but they might be also intrusive. So I just wonder if you guys have a set of standards or training on how to use radios or how not to use them.
Yeah, certainly in the early days, there are a few bits of paper floating around somewhere on the internet talking about radio etiquette. But as a general rule, what we tend to do now is we will make sure that we talk to umpires, particularly through the Monday Mixer, which I hold on a Monday evening during the season for umpires within the South Central area. And we use that as an educational opportunity as well as a discussion opportunity for umpires to understand radio etiquette and what is and isn't acceptable. There was certainly a learning curve when radios were first introduced, and I have my own stories of being on the other end of a colleague who was making all sorts of noises when things happened in the game, whilst it was in my area of control, to the point where it was distracting me from understanding what was going on. But in those days, the players were very mindful generally that it was a new thing for the umpires to get used to, and therefore were quite helpful when that happened. But there is no doubt that umpires will find some people who they umpire with who don't give them anything down the radio when they're looking for something to come through, support, encouragement, whatever it might be. And then there are other umpires who sometimes want to turn their radio off because their colleague down the other end is humming a tune or constantly providing a running commentary on the game or something like that. And what we try and do is encourage our umpires, not just about radios, but about all aspects of the match, to have a really good and thorough pre-match chat so that they can understand where the other person is coming from, so that they can pick up on things really quickly, so that they can ask for what they want over the radio. So if you were an umpire who was very keen for your colleague, for example, to say, yeah, good job, or there's an opportunity here, or don't forget to card, or to just question somebody if they've, for example, given an upgrade within the 23-meter area. Commonly we would use the word "and" down the radio, just to make sure that the umpire is considering, even if they're not going to, does this need a personal penalty as well as a team penalty, that kind of thing. And by and large, we have umpires who are very good, certainly within the neutral appointment system, they're very good at respecting what other people want down the radio, mainly because they've had experience of what they do and don't like themselves. So they find it easier then to say, I would like you to do this, please. I would like you to do that, please. And to use the radios to encourage each other.
During the pregame, if I followed that right.
Yeah.
You're not saying that the umpire is going to say, I would like you to call a penalty corner now.
No, absolutely not. But what they might do is say penalty corner if you want it. So just so that there is awareness there, because we encourage our umpires to understand that they're not individuals on the pitch, they're a team. So it's not about individual decisions, it's about the team decisions. All of that said, there is also umpiring etiquette, which is you do not blow anything in my circle, in my D, unless I specifically have said for you to do that under very strict circumstances, or because I've asked you to in the moment.
We've all fallen down, and you need somebody to do that. It's very, very unbelievably rare. It is problematic when somebody says, "Oh yeah, call anything in my circle." The important thing is that we get the call right. It's like, no, that's not exactly right, because now we have two umpires in this circle over here and only one umpire in that circle over there, and then that becomes unfair. So you mentioned, for example, well, the most important thing is safety. I push back on that just a little bit. I think the most important thing for umpires to do is be fair and to penalize dangerous play, and therefore, we end up with a safe environment. I challenge the players to make sure that they're playing safely. I just don't want to tell a young umpire who's starting, when the kid gets hurt, that it was their fault because we sent them out there with safety as being their number one concern. I just like to phrase it a little bit differently.
I think we're arguing the same thing. I don't disagree with what you're saying, but saying safety is the most important thing is just our shortcut for saying what we don't want is somebody to go out there and just let people get on with it and bash 7 shades of hell out of each other.
They are carrying 3-foot clubs after all. Carbon fiber club. Oh, sorry, 3 foot. Do you know what feet are in England?
Yes, we do. Don't panic.
I know, it was the king's foot, right? So,
we like to straddle both sides of the fence, imperial and metric. So we drive in miles, but we weigh things in kilograms.
Yes. I'm reminded of a very funny Saturday Night Live skit with a comedian where he's playing the role of George Washington, and he's talking about how we're starting our own country and we're gonna do things differently here. For example, And then he starts talking about the metric system versus the imperial system. And, like, why are we doing that? I don't know.
Yeah.
But let's have feet and inches, but some things we'll do in liters. Why?
Yeah.
Anyways, it's a funny skit. I encourage everyone to look it up. Maybe I'll find it and put a link below. Let's see. You mentioned the Monday mixer, and I do want you to talk a little bit about that, but in the context of, so you are an umpire association called South Central, true?
Yes.
And that is roughly based on either governmental borders or just like how far people can travel reasonably to do games that are in some area, which happens to be called South Central. There isn't South Central England in a governmental border, right?
No, correct.
Right. It's just, we've decided these counties or these towns, they make up South Central. So just talking about your association, I know that you do this Monday mixer, which, since it says Monday, I assume is weekly. Is it weekly during the season?
Correct.
Is there a season?
Generally speaking, yes. So
does it run though into indoor? Is your association also responsible for indoor competitions that happen in South Central? Or no, we're talking field hockey, not indoor hockey, or sorry, hockey and not indoor hockey. But just tell me a little bit about that, how you're organized, and then lead into the Monday mixer and why you have it. I attended one online. I assume they're all online, but maybe you have once a month you get everybody together, in person. I don't know. Just tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the Monday Mixer was something that I introduced when I took up the lead developer role, and it was, I think, important to recognize that because of the pandemic and because everybody had got so used to having online meetings and that kind of thing, it was the right time to introduce something like that. I don't believe there was any hockey organization, certainly in England, that was doing it before we introduced it, before I introduced it. But I have certainly encouraged my counterparts in other areas of England hockey to do the same. And it's just a way of getting umpires together on a Monday evening during the season, which for us, the league season is roughly mid to end of September, and then roughly end of March, beginning of April. It all depends on how the league appointments are made and or the matches are put together, and whether or not we need any of the slip dates to be used because of bad weather, meaning that a load of hockey has to be cancelled, as it was a couple of weekends ago. Pitches frosted all over the place, so nobody could play hockey on those days. So on a Monday evening, we get together just for an hour, and any umpire within South Central, and indeed visitors from other areas, should they wish, can come in and they can ask a question, they can talk about a scenario, they can ask for clarification on understanding of a rule. Very often we will have a specific focus subject that we will concentrate on for the first half hour, and then open the floor to bigger questions later. Sometimes the focus subject takes us all hours, sometimes it doesn't. And the point really, some people bring video, and the point really is to help umpires feel a sense of community, to help them understand that they're almost certainly not the only person asking or wondering about something, about some aspect of hockey. It's a great tool for us to communicate things that we have seen from the development team that we would like to either encourage or discourage in the way in which people apply the rules and umpire their games, and just generally chat as umpires, sharing our love for the sport. Yeah, we've been doing that since the formation of South Central. So as I say, 21-22 season, I think. And it's something that we generally get around about 40 people turning up on a Monday evening. And I always have the half hour before the main mixer session, I have that with my developer team, so that we can just catch up on anything that's happened. We can share best practice for coaching and assessing, and how we encourage umpires to do their self-analysis, all of those sorts of things.
And so first of all, are umpires required to attend? I suspect not, because you said about 40 show up. How many people are in the South Central Association, and do they pay dues what's the relationship between an umpire member of South Central and the South Central governing body?
Sure. So England Hockey is the governing body, and all umpires, if they want to pick up a whistle and be listed as the umpire for the match, they have to be a member of England Hockey Officiating. That's free at the lowest level, but that means that you can only do club umpire type games. If you get the higher levels of membership, and certainly the gold level is the one that we would ask our neutrally appointed umpires to take, because that's what partly will put some funding towards developing umpires of the future. So every umpire in England is affiliated to England Hockey Officiating, and then from within that they are able to nominate at least one area as their main area. So we have a number of umpires who have nominated South Central. They might also have another area listed on the GMS system if they live on the border or they quite regularly travel to another area, that kind of thing. So yes, whilst we get sort of regularly about 40 turn up, it is a mix of some umpires who've come through our system and gone on to level 3, come back and share some experiences. We have some club umpires, we have some umpires who are just outside of our area, so don't perhaps umpire for South Central, but they know somebody that does, or they're related to somebody that does, so they will turn up as well. It might not be offered in their area, that kind of thing, if they have any questions. It's a fraction, I would say about 10% of the number of umpires who are registered with England Hockey and have South Central listed. However,
so wait a second, so about 400 umpires?
Yeah, just less than that.
Wow. How big? So how big is South Central? Is it, if you will, I don't know, are there 7 divisions of England that make up, and one of them is South Central, and they probably not just based on geography, but number of teams that are within a certain geography. So do all of the associations sort of have about 400 umpires in it?
No, they don't. Of
course not. The math wouldn't.
That'll be far too simple. So 8 areas were within England. All of the areas will have what's called Premier divisions, which is the level 2 that I was talking about. And so that's just below national level. And they will all have 2 Premier divisions. Underneath that, there are varying numbers and structures depending on the number of clubs and the number of teams and so on and so forth. So we go down to quite a depth in South Central, but not all areas are able to do that, and not all areas are able to supply appointed or neutral umpires to as many divisions as we can. So I know there are some areas that struggle to regularly get enough umpires out just to cover their Premier fixtures and don't go into any of the divisions, whereas we go down to Division 1 in the ladies and Divisions 1 and more or less most of the time Division 2 in the men's, but the divisions themselves can go very far down under that. It's all a slightly different structure, and it is all geographically based. So the reason the restructure was done was because England Hockey consulted with the clubs, and the clubs really helped to shape the structure of the way the areas are set up, depending on what would be most convenient for them. So, for example, we've got a few clubs, as I said, who are technically outside the border of South Central, but as far as transportation is concerned, it's easier for them to get to teams who are within South Central, so that's the area they play in.
Is South Central the largest umpiring association at 400?
Yes, if not one of.
Yeah, okay. But it is the best one, right?
Depends what your category of best is. So yeah, we are we're very lucky, very fortunate in that the way it fell out, we do have a very wide range of teams that are based within our area, so we can offer umpires an awful lot of differing standards of hockey to go and watch or participate in.
How big is the area? I mean, to travel from east to west or north to south, of course, I've just gone north or south and east to west.
That's fine.
What's the drive?
So
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's roughly 2.5 hours north to south, something like that. And then east to west, if you go from the furthest east club to the furthest west club, it's probably a couple of hours. I'd say another 2.5 hours, because some of the transportation links, depending on where you are, aren't as good as others. But yeah, if for me to travel to, and I'm probably at the southwestern, more or less the southwesternmost tip. I technically don't live in the area. I live just outside the area. The area starts about 10 miles up the road for me. But my local club, Bournemouth, do play within South Central, because the road network is such that it's easier for them to do that. Same for me, but it would take me 2.5 hours to get to the club that is technically furthest away from me.
And how far are your umpires typically traveling to a game?
We try and make sure that they don't have to travel for much more than an hour, hour and a half, depending on the level they're at. So level 1 umpires, who are typically doing more local games, shouldn't have to travel more than half an hour to an hour. Whereas level 2 umpires might be expected to travel for an hour and a half, occasionally a little bit further. We try and keep that to a minimum. But it does happen sometimes if we need a particular umpire on a particular match. And some people are happier to travel than others. When I was umpiring National League, my furthest distance was 3.5 hours there to officiate for an hour and a half an hour for tees, and then 3.5 hours back again. So a full day for sure.
Right. So I can think of 3 more questions. We're kind of running up towards the end of our time together. One is, people might be wondering in terms of compensation for that travel or for doing games. In the United States, the games, the competitions, everybody thinks it's, the Olympics. And the umpires are compensated. They're not typically compensated for travel until you're in the NCAA level and you're traveling across the country. For example, you have to get on a plane or you have to drive a certain number of miles, but you're fairly well compensated. I would say even on an hourly basis. So for example, I'm just throwing this out there, you might get paid $300, but you do have to show up to the game an hour ahead of time. You might have had to travel for many hours. You might have had to sleep over. They might have paid for your hotel. They might not have. So it sounds like, oh, a lot of money, but then like you're there for a long time. And then when you finally leave and then you travel home, and, it turns out to, $2 an hour, exaggerating. And in the school world that I mentioned earlier, doing a varsity and JV double, you're probably making $120, $125. It depends on where you are, what region you're in. And so that's $75 for the varsity game and a little less for the, the junior varsity game, which usually takes a little less time. Anyway, so third to the last question, how are you compensated, if at all?
Well, we do it for the love of it, obviously. Umpires don't get paid if they take neutral appointments. They get mileage. So it's an amount per mile. And the system is set up so that it will automatically calculate how many miles you've had to travel to get to the appointment and then back again. So unless there are any extenuating circumstances, so for example, if we ask an umpire to do a double header, or if I do a double header, so I go to one venue, then on to another venue, and then back home afterwards, then it's a slightly different thing, but it's 35 pence a mile within South Central. Each area sets their own mileage rate. However, if you go back down at club level, then some clubs, in fact, most clubs, I think, offer money in return for umpiring, which can be anything from 15, 20, 25, maybe even £30 per match, which again is something that we are never say never. Umpires don't get compensated for doing neutral appointments other than their mileage at the moment, but who knows what the future might hold.
Sure. And I have to say that one of the things I've done as a recruiter of umpires is I tell these young umpires, or would-be young umpires, that it's kind of like $50 an hour, which is pretty good compensation. And I've had college kids, I'm old enough now to say college kids, earning $1,500 across a few months because they've, done a game every afternoon. especially middle school games or the 11, 12, 13, 14-year-old games. You know what I mean? The players are that age. So it is a good recruiting tool, but it is obviously a wholly different system. So you are the lead developer. I know there are signers or appointers and assessors. What other leadership roles are in South Central?
So we have club liaison, Rowena, who I mentioned, who working with the clubs to help them encourage umpires. We also have our TAP official, which is all about technical officials and technical officiating, table officiating, which is all the higher levels.
We don't have that at all in a local association. We don't even have a table. Usually a teenager, maybe she's wearing a boot because she hurt her ankle, is keeping stats, and that's it. Pretty much.
Fair enough. We also have people that, for example, run the indoor appointments and programs. I don't do shed, so I don't tend to talk about it very much. But we have a chairman, vice chairman. We also have who sits on our committee, somebody who was our vice chairman but is now the area discipline administrator. So not technically part of officiating, but obviously very closely linked. And our committee, our chairman reports into the area committee, which is in charge of all hockey, whether it's officiating, whether it's teams, whether it's players, whether it's table officials, technical officials. They are responsible for all hockey within South Central, and they in turn report into the England hockey body to make sure everything is going smoothly. Yeah, there's quite a few people for different things, looking after different things. But if we find that there is a particular area that we want to have more focused attention in, then we are free to appoint people as we see fit. Which is why we've ended up with a level 1 assessment manager, because that was an area that needed focused concentration. I also have somebody who manages the development of umpires at the level 1 level, so that I can concentrate on level 2. But he and I speak regularly, and we both train up new coaches and developers and what have you. So yeah, there's an awful lot of volunteering done behind the scenes.
Yeah, it seems like there's the organization is organized around the development and advancement of umpires, as opposed to like here, the president, the vice president in charge of the treasury, the treasurer, and you might have a position that is called the interpreter to, cover those gaps in the rules that, we all know exist. How are we going to call this? Well, it doesn't really say it in the book, so we're going to do this. And the problem in the U.S. is there are all those little fiefdoms that I mentioned before. A lot of times they have no association with USA field hockey. I love how, like, every one of your umpires is a member of England hockey. Here, there could be umpires who have been umpiring, for decades that don't even know that there's a thing called USA field hockey here. So it's that doesn't serve us very well, frankly. So last question, and this is a kind of a surprise. I didn't give you any warning about this.
Oh.
If you could change one rule or invent a rule or eliminate a rule, offsides is already gone. What would you like to see changed?
That's a tricky one. It's probably going to be something around, they did make it slightly better, but something around penalty corners when an attacker breaks and the injector has to go to the halfway line. Generally speaking, that doesn't have as big an effect on the lower levels of hockey as it does at the higher levels of hockey. Yes, they will probably have a nominated injector, but that person doesn't always necessarily have any particular skills. They just happen to be the person that's doing it. So the purpose of the rule is a little bit redundant. That said, I think what has happened over the last few years is that the rules are starting to catch up with the way in which we umpire. And by that, I mean things like the aerial ball being controlled, but not necessarily on the floor, which is being trialed at Pro League at the moment. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Because the game is developed with 3D skills where, umpires can't be pedantic around this stuff. And we don't want pedants. We don't want people who don't understand the spirit of the game and don't understand how to have empathy with players and don't understand how to keep the game flowing, because we want it to be fast, we want it to be flowing, we want it to be enjoyable for everybody concerned.
Yeah, actually, this is one of the biggest differences between growing up in America and growing up every place else, it seems. There's a good understanding every place else in the world about hockey where not everything is in black and white.
Mm-hmm.
And in America, if it's not in black and white, if you can't judge it in a black and white way, then it cannot be a rule.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it. And that's why you see the NFL, they have super high resolution, super slow motion cameras to see whether the guy's pinky toe touched the out of bounds mark, during a run back. So it's a different sort of cultural thing, obviously, that we, as field hockey people, as umpires, kind of have to fight because, everything isn't black and white. And so many times people would love it to be that way. It would be simpler, but I don't know if the game would be better, that type of thing. So, well, listen, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. I hope you had a good time.
Absolutely. My pleasure. No problem at all.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. I try to sign off by saying that, the harder you train, the more fun you're going to have in games. And I want to emphasize that isn't just for the athletes that are running around with sticks in their hands, but it's also for the athletes that have whistles. And so for Field Hockey Talk, I thank everybody for listening and watching, and we'll see you next time.